Good morning, ladies. Welcome to your 2020-2021 MOPS year. Obviously, coming to you a little bit differently this year. Normally, we'd love to be gathered in one big room, hugging each other's necks and just catching up on everything that happened over the summer. But there's a lot that's happened over the summer that's kind of keeping us apart. So we're going to make the most of it. We are going to just be as intentional as we can about being connected, even though we can't be sitting next to each other. And we want you to know we're here for you, even though you may not see us every week. So anyway, I wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction before I get started. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Markowski. I've been a mentor with this group for, I think, 5 years now. My husband Joe and I moved to Tucson almost 6 years ago. We were with the military, and he had an opportunity to transition from being active duty military, meaning we're moving all the time, to being with the Air National Guard here in Tucson, which means we get to call Tucson our mostly forever home, which we're very excited about. I had no idea that I would love the desert as much as I do, and I had no idea that my kids would flourish as much as they have here. We have 5 kids. Our oldest got married almost 2 years ago, so we also have a daughter in love, and they are, off shaking the world in their own way. They live up in Marana, so still close, but starting to spread their wings. And then our other 4 kids are still at home, and I have a freshman in college, a junior in high school, a freshman in high school, and an 8th grade girl. So we're feeling this pain also of isolation and of all of the online school. It's been a huge adjustment for us. And the kids are just craving community the same way that anyone is, and so I'm learning right alongside of you how to cope with the restrictions of COVID and how to be creative. So I definitely feel your pain, because there's nothing more painful than trying to keep 4 teenagers locked up and away from all the people that they love. So being a mom is the greatest joy of my life. I always knew that I would have kids. I never knew how many, and I'm really grateful that we ended up with 5 because it's fun. And we are for sure spicy. It's full energy, full volume all the time at our house. So I come to pour into this group to be reminded of the sweet moments of when they were little, and also to be reminded of the struggles that I had when they were little, because the struggles are still real, but they're just so different. And so I love being able to be a mentor in this group and be a few steps ahead of you, and to be living proof that you will survive and they will too, and that you'll all be stronger on the other side of toddlers and teenagers and all of those things. So anyway, that's who I am, and every year I get blessed to give the theme talk to the group, which means that I get to talk about the theme that MOPS International has brought us for the year, and kind of delve into why it's important and how it can influence our lives, and the kinds of things we can start to look at in ourselves so that we can become better mamas. So that's my hope for today, is that in this time, whether you're listening while you're nursing your baby or washing your dishes, or you manage to have some quiet time to actually sit and watch undistracted, I just hope that you're able to pull out some kernel of wisdom or information that makes you think, wow, I think that I can apply that, and that can be useful, or that can change my perspective and really maybe help me through this season that I'm struggling with. So ultimately, that's my goal. And I just pray that you are blessed by this time that we have together. And there are some discussion questions that will be available for you and your discussion groups to chat about and kind of unpack. So please make sure to take that opportunity. This talk is always the kickoff of our MOPS year because we want to kick off our conversations with some real meaningful things that we can connect on, and I believe that this is going to do that for us. So I'm going to pray, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Father God, we just lift up this year. We lift up the women that are gathered around their screens, Lord, with their earbuds in, trying to hear over the screams of toddlers. We just pray that you give them peace and rest, Lord, that you fill them up in supernatural ways, give them strength for the things that come their way. And Lord, we just prepare their hearts. We ask you to prepare their hearts for these words, that they would fall on fertile soil, Lord, that the seeds would be planted and that you would grow just really good fruit from it, and that you would make these women into the best mamas that they can be. All right, we're going to get started. So every year I have the opportunity at our retreat to share with our MOPS leadership team in preparation for our MOPS season. And I share with them so that they can feel equipped and inspired and hopefully get excited about the year. And ultimately that is my hope today for you, because this year has been pretty different for all of us, and different can be daunting. It can leave us longing for how things were, and it can make you feel like what's happening right now isn't going to serve you or fulfill you or inspire you. But today I want to challenge that mindset because I know a few things to be true. Number one, I know that God was preparing this moment for us before the chaos of 2020 unfolded. He knew that we would need this framework and this community to help us have a positive, faith-focused outlook on the challenges that we are facing. He knew that we would be tired and disappointed and even defeated, and that he would need to stir our hearts in powerful ways and meaningful ways. We would need something that would propel us toward healthy growth instead of feeling just stuck where we are. And we would need something that would propel us toward action in our community, even though we have to stand apart right now. So we've been given an invitation to decide to rise, and when we say yes to that invitation, it will influence our families and our community. And the second thing I know to be true is that you need this. You need this group, you need these women, and someone in your life needs this too. Mandy Arioto is the CEO of MOPS International, and she wrote a little article in our magazine. This one is called Choose Joy. When you sign up for your MOPS International membership, which we really, really encourage you to do, you're going to get this magazine 4 times a year, and it's full of amazing content written by moms of all stages of life with all kinds of experiences. So it can be a really, really cool thing for you to have to just kind of stuff in your diaper bag while you're sitting waiting an appointment, or read while you're nursing, or whatever the case may be. It's really, really encouraging. So go ahead and take care of your registration. You can get this in your hot little hands as soon as you can. But I wanted to read to you what Mandy Arioto says about mothering, especially in this season. She says, "In a world that feels divided, MOPS International believes that motherhood is the common denominator that demands the best of us and provides the opportunity to rise up for one another. Fellow moms, we may not have created the problems that we are witnessing in the world right now, but we can definitely be the solution. And the place to start is by rushing to our hurting sisters, sharing a meal, and committing to friendship and conversation, even when everyone around us is throwing punches." So when I say, I know that you need this, And I know that someone near you in your circle of influence needs this. That's what Mandy is echoing. She said, more than anything right now, when the rest of the world feels like it is going crazy, we need to be there for each other. We need to be the still and the calm in the chaos. We need to be a place of rest for each other. So make sure you get registered and bring a friend along with you, because after months of being stuck in our homes and missing seeing people's smiling faces, we are craving grace and encouragement and a safe space. So we may not have breakfast casserole and donut holes to welcome you right now, but you need to come into this space to have your soul fed. I know that you are weary and burdened, that you may be scared and struggling, and that you may hate the fact that you have maskne reminding you of your 13-year-old self, and that occasionally the store is still out of toilet paper. So much of this season has forced us to be alone with our thoughts and our struggles. So I know that you need this group, these women, this opportunity to come together and share. Please, please show up, even though it looks a little bit different this year. We are here with grace for this season, and now you get the benefit of MOPS without even ever having to take off your pajamas. Win-win. MOPS International gives us a big theme to operate under every year. And this year, the big theme is Decide to Rise. And even though every theme is really great and seems very fitting for that year, I cannot be more in love with this theme for this year. I love it because it puts us at a fork in the road that requires that we choose one way or another. We have to understand that in this season, we will either decide to rise above the fray and the comments and the division and the fatigue, or we will succumb to weariness and defeat. Let me assure you that making the choice to rise, even if it doesn't come easily or happen all at once, is a huge victory. Deciding to rise means that you have admitted that you cannot do this in your own strength, that you don't want to live life alone, and that you acknowledge the hope of tomorrow. Because things don't rise without something pushing and changing and filling them up in a new way. Think about your lungs when you take a deep breath. As you inhale and you fill your lungs with oxygen, you can see your chest respond by rising. It cannot stay still and unchanged when it is being filled up in such a significant way. It must grow, expand, and rise. So when you commit to rising, it means you are open to relationships, to encouragement, to growth and inspiration. It means you don't want to stay right where you are, because you know there is something beautiful waiting on the other side of this struggle. I was recently talking to my sister who has 3 kids, 10 and under, and I could tell right away that she was really upset, because as soon as her voice came across the line, there was a quiver, and she was on FaceTime, and I could see that her eyes were puffy and the tears were welling. And she related to me how even though she has all these perfect systems and cubbies and hooks and bins and whatever else, she has all this space, everything has a place, that no one ever picked anything up. There were toys and coats and bikes and books all over the floor, and no one ever put anything back where it belonged. And she was constantly first reminding them, and then asking them, and then nagging them to pick up their stuff. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. And how even though she asked nicely 11 million times a day, no one ever listened until she lost her ever-loving mind and had a huge blowout and was shouting at the top of her lungs. And my heart hurt for her as she was relaying all of this, because I have stood in her shoes so many times, desperate for something to change and make things better, and wishing that that angry outburst wasn't where we had gotten to and wasn't the thing that got their attention. My sister called me because she knew that I could relate and that I was a few steps ahead and that I might be able to offer some advice. She looked to me for an example that might inspire her next steps in her story. So as a group this year, we are going to do the same thing. We are going to look at examples of women who were faced with situations that could have made them want to stomp their feet and yell and shout and cry all the ugly cries. And some of them did at first, but what we will see is that instead of staying in those moments of hurt and fear and frustration and despair and loneliness, they decided to rise in their stories. In the book of Judges, we read about a woman named Deborah who was called to be a leader in Israel. Now, she was leading a nation who, like my sister's kids, didn't want to listen or follow the rules and the systems that had been put in place for their protection and their well-being. They were distressed and they had no fight left in them. In Judges 5:7, it says, "The villagers ceased in Israel. They ceased until I arose. I, Deborah, arose as a mother in Israel." Deborah didn't have to get any level of certification or training to do what God had called her to. She simply stepped fully into what God created her to be, a mother, and trusted that the skills and the intuition and the nurturing heart that God had given her would be more than enough. She didn't deny or resist her position in the culture as a woman or a wife, but she never allowed herself to be hindered by it either. We are called to remember that motherhood is not a constraint. It is a catalyst. Our successes, our contributions, and our legacies come out of this position of motherhood. Instead of thinking that we're held back by it, we have to remember that it propels us towards our greatest victories and our deepest joys. There are other extraordinary women in the Bible who were also catalysts, not because they were perfect or had the right answer all the time or led sin-free lives. Instead, these women that we will look at were catalysts because they decided to rise in their moments of struggle, in their moments of sorrow and defeat, and they showed up big in their own stories. So this year we're going to look closely at 8 women of the Bible who rose in the face of challenge and adversity. They rose up in their faith for their children, for their families, and for their communities. And we will see over and over again through these women that they don't have to be perfect or privileged to be loved, to be called, and to be equipped by God. So the first woman that we're going to look at is Bathsheba. And she was a woman who had lost a husband and a child. And her second husband was one of the greatest kings of all time. But she still knew loss and struggle and anguish. And yet her story is one of grace and redemption. Lydia was a successful businesswoman who juggled the demands of being a leader in her community and providing for her family. She is desperate to lead well in her family and extend hospitality to those around her. Her story is a picture of joy and generosity. Rahab was a prostitute who witnessed the power of God and understood the change that he promised. She put her life, her livelihood, and her community ties on the line for her faith. She shows us how to live lives that are brave and beautiful and faithful. Ruth was from another land, but she left her family and her culture to marry her husband. And when he died, she was forced with a choice: remain with the foreigners who had become her family or return to her homeland. She shows us what it means to live out love and loyalty. Esther was a Jewish woman who rose to a position of power and influence in Persia when she became queen. Despite the danger to her own life, She used her position to fight for and defend the Jewish people and prevent their massacre. She displays courage and devotion. Tamar was a woman who had to fight for her family in the face of deception, judgment, ridicule, and fear. She tried to take action and control her circumstances without first trusting that God's plan and promise was enough. Her story is one of restoration and justice and mercy. Martha and Mary were sisters who wanted to live out their faith through devotion and hospitality. They struggled with balance and argued over who was right. Through their story, we begin to understand the value of both work and worship. The characteristics that these women display as they awaken to the fact that they have work to do in their lives will be our table names this year. They will serve as reminders that we share the same identity as so many women who have come before us, that we are fearfully and wonderfully made with good works set before us to complete. Your DGL will share with you in the next couple of days which table you are at, and I'll spend each Monday for the next 6 weeks posting an in-depth look at each of the women that we are focused on this year. It is our greatest hope that you draw encouragement and inspiration and guidance from these women and their stories. And we pray that their stories will become catalysts in your lives as you decide to rise. So we also have 3 sub-themes under our big theme of Decide to Rise. Our first sub-theme is Be Strong. This is a hard one because as mothers, we often buy into the lie that strength is doing all the things for all the people all the time. And if we're not doing all the things for all the people all the time, we are somehow lacking or failing or weak. So I'm going to be honest with you. This call to be strong is a challenge. And it's a challenge because most of the time I'm not sure how to be strong when it feels like I'm running on fumes every day. And sometimes I think we get wrapped up in the idea that strength is like some kind of superpower that's going to allow us to, leap tall buildings in a single bound with a toddler on our hip and a baby strapped to our back. But let me tell you, if you have parented another human for even 1 hour, you know strength. But I know that if you have parented another human for even 1 hour, you also know scars. And sometimes we feel like those scars that we carry with us, either on our body or on our hearts or in our minds, that they eat away at us and that we feel like they can diminish our ability to be strong. But I want to flip that script today. So almost a year ago, my oldest son and his wife came over for dinner, and they brought their dog Coda. We have dinner every week together, once a week, at which I love. I mean, come on. My kid wants to come hang out with me. Okay, I'll take it, So we have a dinner every week, so this was not unusual. That Coda loved playing with our 3 dogs, and they all got along pretty well. And we had a really great evening, and we're enjoying our time together and cleaning up the meal and getting ready for root beer floats, which was what was next on the agenda. And I was in the kitchen petting our dog Duke, and someone let Coda in the house. And in that moment, I couldn't tell you what it was because they'd been getting along just fine. But as Coda came in the door, and I was petting Duke, something happened between the two of them. And they were on each other so aggressive and so instantly that no one knew what was going on. And I was caught right in between them. And in the swirl of chaos, my arm got caught in Coda's jaw. and he came down hard on my wrist. And I knew right away that it was going to be bad because I got lightheaded instantly. And I, clamped my hand down on top of the bite as like blood started rushing up through my long sleeve shirt. And I said clearly and calmly, I'm going to need to go to the ER. So because my husband was out of the country for work, my 20-year-old son scooped up his keys and got me in the car. And I closed my eyes the whole way to the hospital, just like doing my deep breathing that I knew from years and years of laboring through children, and trying not to pass out. Because guys, I am not a blood and guts and gore girl. I used to routinely pass out when I would get my blood drawn, and so it doesn't take much really to push me over the edge. And I could not even think about what was waiting under that sleeve, because I didn't want my kid to also have to manage his mom, who had blacked out, in the front seat while he was stressed out driving me to the ER. So I held my arm away as the nurse did her initial investigation, which was painful. And my kid, I looked in his eyes, and he was across the room, and he was like, it's not good, Mom. And I thought, I'm not going to look at that right now. I cannot look at that right now. And so I didn't even look at it until they had given me a sedative that totally chilled me out. I was awake and aware of what was going on, but I was not bothered. And they came in, with the suture stuff and all the stuff to clean it out. And thank goodness for that medicine, because I almost had an out-of-body experience, and I could watch it and see what was going on and be totally chill about it. But I know that if I were in my right mind, I would have been freaking out. My wound was really deep, and the damage was extensive. They put some stitches into my arm, deep down in the muscle, but then also some on the top in my skin. But it was so bad, they could only hold the little edges together. They couldn't even close it all the way. And so, obviously, I had to keep it, covered and protected. And I had it that way for months. I kept it wrapped up and protected from the world. I couldn't show anyone because the damage was so extensive that most people couldn't stomach looking at it. In fact, when I got home from the hospital, my daughter, who's a freshman in college right now and wants to be a nurse, was like, Mom, I will be the person to help you take care of this while you need to have it, wrapped. I was having to wrap it 3 different times a day. And she's like, I will be your person. I was like, great. Because I just didn't know if I was going to be able to do it. And I took the bandages off, and she was like, I got to go lay down. She could not even. So you just know it was bad. So I had to keep it bandaged because it just was going to be a problem for everyone. It was not going to be safe or clean, and it was going to be really repulsive. But I also struggled with not being able to talk about it, and people not knowing necessarily how deep the wound was and how much it had affected me, and how I was still really struggling with anxiety surrounding dogs who seemed nice but could be aggressive. And it took 3 months for the wound to close, but it is not anywhere near fully healed, and it may never be without plastic surgery. And I'm going to have nerve damage as well that will probably last the rest of my life. But to be honest, I'm not sure if I want to fix the look of my skin, because that scar reminds me of the uncommon strength that I had in that moment. It reminds me of how I can be calm under pressure, and it takes me back to the FaceTime calls I made from that hospital bed, to tell my kids with a smile on my face, I'm going to be okay. I didn't want them to worry, and the last thing they saw was their mom running out of the house with, blood dripping down her arm. And So I called and I smiled and I said, it's going to be okay. And the scar reminds me also of my husband's voice coming across the line thousands of miles away, echoing in my ear. I'm so proud of how brave and strong you are. And I never knew that this scar, which is now like crazy shades of purple and pulls at my skin in funny ways, could be the catalyst to remind me of how strong I really am. Our scars, wherever they are, ladies, whatever they're from, they birth our greatest strengths. They bring us to the point of surrender and lead us to a path of healing and invite others into our stories in incredibly meaningful ways. But no one will know about the strength of a scar unless you are willing to show them that scar and be vulnerable. Even Jesus recognized the power of sharing his scars. In John 20, we find the story of the tomb being empty after Jesus had risen from the dead on the third day following his crucifixion. He appears to his disciples, but one of his disciples, Thomas, wasn't with the group when they saw Jesus. And of course, they ran to him and said, Thomas, Jesus has risen. We have seen him. And of course, Thomas said, I don't believe you. In fact, Scripture tells us that he said, unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and I put my finger where the nails were, and I put my hands in his side, I won't believe it. I won't believe it unless I see it. So Jesus goes to Thomas and shows him his scars and allows him to see and feel, which allowed him to trust and believe. Our scars, whether they are physical or mental or emotional, point to the hardest moments of our lives. And the fact that we can stand in front of someone else and show them our scars points to the greatest story of redemption and strength in our lives. In the hospital, this is the shirt that I was wearing, by the way, the day that I got bit. Can you read it? It says life to the full. This is actually last year's theme, and I got this shirt when I went to MomCon, and I love it because it was a perfect Tucson shirt, lightweight, long sleeve for the winter, and fun color. And obviously when they were dealing with my arm, they cut right up the sleeve, and I was broken over the fact that they had just, destroyed one of my favorite shirts. I mean, I knew why they had to, but I was broken. And so when I was sitting there with this one sleeve all raggedy and cut up and like a pirate and my arm hanging out and this other sleeve still intact, I was just so sad that this thing that was special to me wasn't going to be useful anymore, wasn't going to be the same. And after they gave me that medicine, I had some like real moments of clarity. And I was sitting there looking at my arm and this shirt and how sad and I have to throw it away now. And they had left some scissors, not sharp ones, but like cutting things, scissors. And I said to my son, come over here, and I handed him the scissors. I said, cut the other sleeve off. He's like, what? I said, cut the other sleeve off. Look this can still be useful to me. It does not look the same. It definitely has been changed and altered, and there is a story to it, but it can still be useful. And I just think God is doing a good work here, because this shirt says life to the full, and this part has not changed. With long sleeves or short sleeves, the shirt promises the same thing, life to the full. God has promised life to the full. And whether you have a scar that has changed you or made you feel less useful or less impactful in the world, God still promises you life to the full, and you have to get out of your own way and step into that promise that He has delivered already. I promise that if you allow yourself to believe that to be true, that if you don't say, well, this is different now, I'm going to throw it away, it's useless, that He will redeem that part of your life. Now, I don't wear this shirt out in public, obviously, but you can bet your bottom dollar that I work out in it at least once a week, because I love what it represents. And I love the fact that even though it got torn and tattered and changed in ways I never anticipated, it is still beautiful and useful. So when you hear the call to be strong this year, I don't want you to feel extra pressure to, join a gym and lose 20 pounds. Maybe you will, and that would be great. I don't want you to feel like, well, I better wrap up counseling, get my graduation certificate because I need to be strong. I cannot be relying on other people. That's also a lie. You stay in counseling if you need counseling. You absolutely rely on other people to tap into your strength. And I also do not want you to buy into the lie that you have to do all the things for all the people all the time. That's not strength. And when you are tired and weary and doubting yourself, I want you to look at your scars and remember you are already strong. You already know what it takes to rise up and be strong in moments that are difficult, for seasons that might seem impossibly long. I want you to feel free to hold up your scars and say, this happened, and it was hard, and it still scares me. But this is what I learned from it. Because by recognizing your strength and sharing your scars, you will unlock freedom and strength in the woman next to you. And your vulnerability will be the foundation of her decision to rise, and we will get stronger together. So the second sub-theme that we have this year is do your work. And when I heard this prompt, I was reminded of a story that I recorded a few years ago, and I want to share it with you today. We have a dove who loves to roost in our lemon tree in the backyard, and the tree is really mature, so it has like these wide branches and lots of leaves, and this like kind of dark green covey foliage that just really gives her a safe place to be with her babies and be camouflaged. And in the 5 years that we have lived here, the lemon tree has really provided a safe and secure place for her to be during nesting season. And the kids and I, as soon as we knew kind of where she was going to be and how she kept returning, we loved just kind of checking in on her and peeking in, to see a couple of eggs, and then later a couple of chicks, who were peeping and desperate for food. But this year, as she returned to her familiar roost, I noticed that her nest looked a little tattered and loose, and the branches were a little bit broken and black, and they had been like weathered. They'd sat through rain and sun and storms, and the bottom half of the nest was kind of like sagging like an old pair of yoga pants that have lost their stretch. And my heart broke because I realized that instead of rebuilding a nest to lay her eggs in, she was reusing the nest from the previous season. And I knew, looking at it, I could tell the nest wasn't strong or sturdy enough to safely hold her eggs. And shortly after I noticed this, we came out to check, and under the lemon tree were 2 eggs that had fallen out of the nest and cracked in the middle. And there was still one, but a few days later, that egg kind of met the same fate. And before that last egg fell, I remember standing in front of the tree one day when she was in the nest, and her little black beady eye was kind of staring back at me, you know, through the leaves. And I kind of leaned in and I whispered, "Mama, you have got to do the work. I know it's hot and I know it's hard, and this nest seems like it should be just fine, but it's a new season and you have to do new work to make this work." So deep down inside, I was hoping like my innermost Dr. Dolittle had gotten through to her, and that she really just was profoundly impacted by my mentorship, you know, and that she would just go out and get busy building a new nest, or at least bringing in sticks to reinforce the one she had or something. I know she was probably actually just freaking out that this giant face was peering in to the comfort and safety of her nest. And as you know, she didn't go and get any more sticks or fix the nest because she lost that 3rd egg. But she got me thinking about our own journeys as mothers, and how we are often lured into thinking that the work we did yesterday, last week, or last month will be enough to get us through this current season. And how many times do we struggle through a new phase or change because we're trying to apply the same solutions from another situation to this current different situation? And how much drama and turmoil emerge because we want to rubber stamp solutions to every problem, regardless of which kid we're dealing with or what circumstances have led us here. I used to hate making budgets and talking finance with my husband. I don't love it now, but it's better. And I'll tell you why. It was stressful to the point that I was like having adolescent breakouts and binge eating chocolate in the laundry room behind a closed door, because I just didn't understand how I was supposed to create a budget that would anticipate every financial situation that our growing family would encounter. How do I plan for Christmas in June when we're spending every last disposable penny on a family vacation? And how do I possibly devise a budget that accounted for 1 month that had 3 birthdays and another month that had three trips to the ER with, you know, follow-up appointments and prescription co-pays, and now we're eating ramen, you know, for the rest of the year. I just didn't understand how one budget could do it all. And in my mind, that budget would be like a contortionist at the circus, you know, twisting and turning and bending in all kinds of unnatural and almost impossible ways. So after years and years of these like ulcer-making conversations about finances, you know, around the dining room table, which always happened, you know, at 10 p.m. at night, and I just was like tired from having a baby or nursing a baby or whatever, and it just seemed like the epitome of stress. And it just always ended in a fight. But someone finally kind of spoke some truth into my life and said, "Hey, here's a game-changing strategy. How about every month you do the work? You figure out what you need for the month ahead, and then you adjust." So every 30 days, I had to sit down with a calendar and the paychecks and create like a strategy for successfully navigating whatever demands the next month we're going to have that we knew about. Obviously, can't anticipate everything, but things you know that are coming up. I could not assume that last month's plan would get me through this month. Last month, maybe I put new tires on the car. This month, that money would go somewhere else. And for a long time, I thought I had to create a budget that would allow me to put new tires on, take a vacation, make a car payment, put braces on a kid, replace the washing machine, and buy new yoga pants every month. Every month. I just didn't see how our paycheck could make that happen, because it wasn't going to. And it was an unrealistic expectation. It absolutely blew my mind to realize that it didn't have to do everything all the time. But in order for it to do what I needed it to do when I needed it to, I had to do the work. Which brings me back to my mama dove nesting in the lemon tree. Friends, we all want to be the best mamas that we can. Does that mean that every moment is perfect? No. Does that mean if we take shortcuts, we're failures? Absolutely not. But it does mean in the areas that are essential, we do the work. We do the work to nurture our children, to assess their needs, to listen to their hurts, to discipline and correct and love deeply. And we do the work to care for ourselves, to cultivate our relationship with God, to work in our community. We do the work to feed our marriages in healthy ways. And we do the work because the work is worthy and rewarding and fruitful. So when Mama Dove left the nest, I pulled it down. I pulled those tattered, weathered, worn out branches that were barely held together from where it nestled in the crook of the lemon tree branch, and I threw it away because it had worked hard for a season, and that work was honorable and it was well done. But it was time for new work to be done. It was time for strong branches that could stand against the wind and the warmth and the water that would come. And it was time for that mama to gather and build and birth anew. So I encourage you to take a good look at areas that might need you to do your work. Our lives and our journeys are marked by seasons. So don't expect the plan or the strategy or the approach or the skills that you have right now to be a one-size-fits-all, lasts forever solution. Take what you have learned, weave it into a new thing to help you build and make this season stronger. When you gather and you build and you live and you pause and you reflect and you reevaluate and you renew, this is your work. This is what you are called to do, and it is worthy. Don't settle for what sustained you in your last season. You and your babies need strength and comfort, security, and stability. Don't be lured by what is comfortable or easy. Do the work. It's worthy and it's worth it. So our third sub-theme is chase joy. And I shared this story with our leadership team at our retreat. And so many people were impacted by it that I just thought I would share it with you as well. And I hope it speaks to you a little bit today. When we were younger in our careers in the military and our kids were much smaller, we lived in a house with a big green front yard that just stretched out in front of it. And it had two big oak trees in the front yard that created this beautiful canopy of shade out in front. And we had a really tiny backyard, and so the front yard was just the most wonderful place to be, you know, especially on a beautiful spring day when the leaves were rustling and the sun was kind of shining and keeping us warm. Just, you know, it still required a sweater, but the kids loved being out in the front and enjoying that space together. And we would sit out there and read or color or play dolls or action figure men and spend hours out there. But their most favorite thing to do was to play tag. It never failed that we would have, you know, piles and piles of things to entertain them, and we'd be sitting out there for hours at a time. And at some point in the day, one of them would like sneakily come up behind me and tap me on the shoulder and yell, "Tag, you're it," you know, while running in the other direction. And a spontaneous game of tag erupted without notice, but always brought like pure delight to their faces. And I would set aside whatever I had in my hands in the time and get up and chase them. Now, I say that like it was easy. I would just get up and chase them. But after having 5 babies, I'm sure I don't have to tell you that chasing them wasn't always easy. It wasn't always fun. And it often wasn't even the thing that I wanted to be doing. But I always chased them. I chased them because that pursuit ended in deep belly laughs and sweaty faces and full-on bear hugs when I finally caught them and pulled them to the ground and we just collapsed in a pile of contentment. This is a story that I return to in my heart because there isn't a day that has passed since that season that I thought choosing to chase them wasn't worth it. It was worth the sweat and the sore muscles and the discomfort and the occasional inconvenience. It was worth putting aside my agenda or my to-do list or whatever was preoccupying me at the time, putting all of that aside and choosing to chase after them without regard for who was watching. It was worth it because in the end I found delight and was rewarded with unconditional love. We are called this year to chase joy. And I feel like it's an invitation to live life like it's that big green front yard. We are going to find ourselves in so many moments where we are preoccupied and busy and distracted. We're going to be tired and maybe even grumpy and probably won't be in the mood or feel like we have the strength. But that invitation to chase joy is always right there. Run hard after joy, even though some days or weeks or months or years are hard. And in those seasons, we may be less than happy with our circumstances. Chasing joy is a way to combat our tendency to complain, our tendency to accuse, and our tendency to be offended. It is often hard and sweaty work, but when you chase joy, others will follow because it is magnetic and contagious. As women and mothers, developing the reflex to chase joy means replacing that old tired track in our minds that tells us, you aren't good enough. We got to replace that with the truth of our identity in Christ, which is that we are fearfully and wonderfully made and loved. This is a definite choice that we have to make and a truth that we have to accept, and that choice is made daily, sometimes moment by moment. We have to choose that truth and the joy that follows frequently and consistently so that it becomes a beautiful, life-giving rhythm in our lives. But that choice to turn toward the promise of God requires action. 1 Thessalonians 5:16 says, "Be joyful always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances." Holy moly! That is no small task. But taking these steps can begin with small changes. You don't have to flip your whole world upside down and try everything new all at one time. Pick one thing you want to focus on. Pick the thing that you feel like is robbing you of joy. Is it your mental soundtrack? Is it the fact that you don't have 5 minutes of quiet time in the day? Is it that you have not touched your Bible in 6 months? Is it that you and your husband have not had a date night? Figure out something that you know would help you refocus at this point, and it's a small change, but it would have a big impact. Because you have to remember that this action of choosing is required, because we are not just going to have joy fall into our laps because our eyes open every morning, right? It's not an automatic thing. You have to choose it. The world is working hard to distract you from what is already yours. It is there for the taking. Jesus came to this world and died so that we would have life and life to the full. That is a promise that does not change based on our bank account, our fertility struggles, the status of our marriage, or the deep feeling of loneliness that can blindside you on a Tuesday afternoon. Those are your circumstances, but our joy is constant, and the invitation to chase that joy is also constant. It's always available. So let those little nudges throughout the day, those little pokes in the shoulder or pricks on the heart, be reminders of what God has promised, and allow them to pull you away from what is preoccupying you, and then propel you into actively chasing joy. I realize that the things that I have said to you today, first of all, there was a lot. So the nice thing about a video is you can go back and rewatch something that you might have heard and you thought, what did she say? Or, wow, that was hard. I need to work on that. Let me listen to it again. So I know there was a lot here, but I want to also let you know that it's all really important. And if you are willing to take the time to really sit with it and consider its truth in your life and the power that it can have to open you to growth and unlock some of the chains that you feel bound by right now, I promise you that you will see reward in that work that you'll do. So please take the time to reach out to your discussion group leaders. Have conversation with the women in your groups. Share with them what is hard for you right now, what they could pray for you about, and how they can support you. Because I promise you, you will not be the only person who needs a listening ear right now. And even though your struggles look different from someone else, it doesn't mean that they are not valid. So please step into this space. It's a safe space. It's a space with grace and mercy and love and support and desire to just live with you through this. So use it. Accept the invitation. Have those conversations. And just know that your leadership team is constantly praying for you and constantly working to create content and experiences that can bless you even though we can't be together. So I'd like to just close with a prayer, and then I just also want to say that I cannot wait until we can be together again, because I miss seeing all of your smiling faces. So go ahead and bow your head with me. Father God, we are so thankful for this group of women who are gathered around their devices and who are listening. Lord, let them know that these are your words, that these are the promises that you have for their life, and that these are the invitations that they are just called to every day, God, that they are called to look around that toy room that is strewn with every version of Frozen and Paw Patrol, and remember that these babies are blessings, and that this work we're doing now is probably our greatest work. Just fill us with encouragement, Lord. Fill us with the knowledge that you are here with us every step of the journey. Allow us to see our community show up in big and important ways for us, even though we can't be together. And allow our hearts to be tender and to trust. Vulnerability is hard, especially online, when you can't sit across from someone, you can't hold their hand, you can't pass them a Kleenex. And so we just trust, Lord, that you are going to work in this season, this really weird season where we have to be apart, but that you are going to use this time to build our community to be stronger and better than we ever were before. All right, ladies, we love you so much and pray that you are just blessed beyond measure in this MOPS year, and we cannot wait to see what this season holds for all of us. We'll talk to you later.